then we can start. Wonderful. I can see the recording has started. Yes, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this Friday lunchtime, precious time Friday lunch, for this mindfulness webinar. I'm Katja Behrendt. I convene the Mindfulness Special Interest Group as part of the Q community. I'm a doctor by background working in climate change in the NHS, and my interest in mindfulness is as somebody who practices mindfulness and meditation, but also, because I work in the NHS and in around a lot of change, people and systems. How can mindfulness help us in our in my daily life, in my work? And so we've done a few of these webinars, and they are on the YouTube channel. Today what we're going to do is, it's in 3 parts. So in the beginning we're going to have a mindfulness practice, which I'm going to lead. There is no prior experience necessary. And then I'm going to hand over to James, who's joined us today, and those of you who were around the last meeting will have already met. And he's going to talk a bit about a research project he has done, which has some quite interesting insights. And then the last bit of the webinar, we'll just have some time to talk about how do we bring in mindfulness into our organizations. How's that going? Is there any sort of like learnings, any experience we can share, anything we're struggling with, to just have that sort of conversation among like-minded people. So that's the outline for today. If you haven't already, do introduce yourselves in the chat. We're going to keep people muted, or if you could mute yourself for the next little bit, that would be great. Then we're going to just start with some practice. Fantastic. So you're welcome to switch off your video for the next little bit or leave it on, whatever works best for you. And I'm going to ring a bell at the beginning and the end of the practice. And just take a couple of deep breaths, just getting out of your head, getting into your body, breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in and breathing out. And then just notice your feet on the ground, your feet, your connection to the earth. Feeling into your feet and just arriving. This time is just for you. You don't have to be anyone. You don't have to do anything. This time is just for you. And then we're just going through the different parts of our bodies, starting with our head and our face, and just noticing the expression on our face, Noticing if there's any tension in the jaw. Noticing if our eyes are relaxed, if our tongue is relaxed. Being present with our experience with a kindly awareness. Then including the rest of our head in this awareness. And then moving on to the neck and the throat. What can you notice? Being curious. Moving on to the shoulders. Notice if you're holding your shoulders and if you can relax a little bit more. Then your arms, upper arms, elbows, lower arms, and hands. Noticing the temperature of your hands. Noticing any small sensations like tingling. Bringing our awareness to our chest. The movement of the breath going through our chest and the stomach and the abdomen. Noticing any movement or sound, just being curious. Then bringing your awareness to your back, upper back, middle back, lower back. What can you notice? And if there is any tension or discomfort, see if you can let go a little bit more. Next, turning your awareness to your hips and the pelvis. Being curious, what can you notice in this area? What sensations are there? Then bring your awareness to the surface you're sitting on and the parts of your body that are in touch with the chair. Bringing your awareness to the thighs and the big muscles. If you notice any tension, just try to let go a little bit more. Bring your awareness to your knees. Can you feel the skin on the back of your knees? And then the lower legs, calf muscles and shins. And the ankles. And the feet. Noticing the temperature of the feet and any small sensations. See if you can feel into each of your 10 toes. And then try to broaden out your awareness to include your whole body, all of your body. What is this experience of being you in this moment? How does it feel to be alive in this moment? And then letting go of any effort you might be making. And just noticing if anything has changed through this practice. And in a moment, I'm going to ring the bell. And the invitation is to come out of the practice, switch on your camera, and just take in who's here. So we're drawing the practice to a close, and you're welcome to do any movement that helps you. And then just the invitation is to start your camera and just take in who's here with us this Friday lunchtime. Connecting virtually, but we're still here. Yeah, lovely to get a sense of who's here with us. We're all looking a little bit more rested, don't we? And a bit more smiley. That's fantastic. Yeah, congratulations. You've done your mindfulness practice today. You can always do more, but yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge taking this time for yourself. Yeah, so for the next, I mean, does anyone want to share anything from this practice? I just want to give a moment, if anything, I've seen a couple of comments already in the chat, but I just want to, if anyone wants to share anything that came up, or do put it in the chat, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself. There's no pressure.
I just add something, if I may.
Sure.
That's my first experience of it, to be honest, and yeah, it felt really refreshing. I'm surprised I didn't fall asleep, if I'm honest. Yeah, I've always got a lot of tension up my upper body, my lower back, and also I've suffered with on my left ankle. I've ruptured ligaments. So I noticed when you were talking down through the body, I could feel my right foot was quite warm. I could feel kind of like a pulsation kind of thing, but my left foot, I didn't feel that as much. That may be just due to the damage there. So yeah, it's a great first experience. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's interesting to, I mean, it's been a really interesting experience for me, certainly, to notice all the different parts of my body a bit more. And the pleasant and and also the numb bits, basically. Yeah. Anyone else want to share?
I can. So hi, I'm Hannah. I've had a very frazzling morning, which all feels like it's washed away now, and feel clear, can think much more clearly, refreshed, and yeah, just back into a space that I'd like to be in to progress the afternoon's work. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did anyone have not such a smooth experience? Because that's also welcome. If you couldn't focus, or you felt a bit sleepy, or that's also welcome. But if everybody had a pleasant experience, that's great too. Okay. Yeah, so then we might continue to the next bit, where James has kindly offered to talk a bit about some work that he's done. So James McMahon is a senior project manager at the West of England Health and Science Network. And on top of his work in like program management in different NHS organizations, he is quite interested in leadership and mindfulness. So he studied the use of psychological education to improve leadership in project teams. And he also did that in relation to mindfulness, or how mindfulness can help. And he's going to talk a little bit about that, and also how he measured and evaluated that. Because I think last time there was quite a lot of interest in, if we do mindfulness in our organizations, how do we actually measure the impact? So yeah, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Katja. Thanks, Katja. I'm feeling far too relaxed to give a presentation now, but I'm going to try anyway. I think what I'm going to do is turn my camera off, but share my screen. That way I can read the notes without you all looking at me looking distracted. So on we go. I think we've got some time for Q&A at the end, but if anyone's got any questions they want to put in the chat and we can run through them at the end, that would be great. So, screen share. Okay, so thanks for the opportunity just to walk you through a piece of research I did, really well introduced by Katja. So it was really that everybody was talking about mindfulness, and some of that was about staff well-being. What I also found through my research is actually that utilizing mindfulness as a practice, as a psychological education for people who are involved in managing projects and leading different pieces of work can be really useful, because as my research shows or has identified, by practicing mindfulness yourself, there's quite strong evidence that you can enhance your emotional intelligence. And there's a whole plethora of research around leadership ability, the key assets of a good leader, and how emotional intelligence is probably the key thing that all successful leaders have in abundance. So I'm just going to see if I can work out how to run this now. Here we go. Okay, so within my research, I found this quote, which I thought was really useful when considering projects, and that is that projects don't deliver anything, people do. And this quote is from an article that was in a project magazine. And while I was studying an MSc in project management, I learned the real world evidence that about 70% of projects actually fail due to running out of time, coming in over budget, or not achieving the outcomes that they were set up to deliver. So while we have a whole range of really effective project management processes, such as Prince2, Agile, various quality improvement methodologies that you'll all be really familiar with, projects are actually dependent on the people that have come together to deliver the project, how they interact with one another, how they engage and interact with their stakeholders, and most importantly, how they support and lead one another to complete the project successfully. So another great quote there from Clark. Project managers are consistently subject to emotion-generating situations, and their emotional awareness plays a part in determining how they potentially respond to the emotional information generated. All our projects here in the NHS are delivered in a really complex, diverse, value-driven environment. And that means that emotional intelligence and being able to have a range of interpersonal soft skills are really important to support the interactions between individuals. So the aim of the research, as I've probably covered, was to look at how we could enhance project managers' abilities to deliver and lead projects by helping to increase their emotional intelligence and improve their soft skills. And a bit of the background, I was looking at project management for my master's and for my job. But one of the projects I was involved in was setting up a community interest company to deliver mindfulness en masse to a population across deprived communities in South Wales. And the reason for this was that there was a very high prescribing rate of antidepressants. And a feasibility study identified that what we actually needed to do was to give the population some tools to self-manage their mental health and well-being, because once they got to the doctor, the standard practice was just to prescribe antidepressants, which is what we were aiming to stop happening. So ever since Daniel Goleman identified emotional intelligence as a key trait for leaders, studies have examined how people might be able to develop and build their emotional intelligence in order to improve and enhance their leadership skills. In his article, Projects Are Emotional, Clark explored how emotions influence the behavior and decision-making of project managers, specifically within interpersonal relationships. And he found, as I said, that project managers are consistently subject to emotion-generating situations. There's actually a whole book on mindfulness in project management by Pythagorsky, and he was the first person to consider the application of mindfulness in project management. And he concluded that cultivating greater mindfulness together with the ability to step back is key to emotional intelligence. So when I gave this presentation, or a similar version of this presentation, to the project managers and NHS managers who were going to be involved in the research, I wanted to infuse them with what we were doing. And so I gave them a presentation that talked a bit about emotional intelligence, about mindfulness, and about neuroscience as well, because that's very pertinent. So I'm just going to run through the information which we shared with people participating in the research. So Daniel Goleman is seen as the father of emotional intelligence, and he talked about 5 interrelated domains of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And so we're going to look at those again in a bit more detail. Caruso and Salove also looked at this, and they came up with 4 emotional skills, those being the ability to accurately perceive emotions, the ability to integrate emotions with cognition, understanding emotional causes and consequences, and managing emotions for personal adjustment. So if we just go back to Goleman and his definitions and hallmarks, we can share the presentation afterwards, but here he goes through each of the domains and he gives a definition of each domain and then some of the hallmarks. And if you look through the hallmarks and think about people who are successful leaders or people you work with who you respect for their leadership ability, or indeed when you're having to lead yourself, some of the things that you try and expose and offer to other people, you'll see that these hallmarks are quite clear and clearly useful when you're in that role. So I'll move those on the screen for a minute. So let's just have a quick look. So with self-regulation, that's like the inner conversation where people recognize their emotions and how to control them. Self-regulation in a leader enhances integrity, strengthens personal virtue, but also organizational strength. bad things happen in organisations that are impulsive and reactive. And then just looking at some of the other definitions. Empathy, well, we're all clear why empathy is so important within health and social care and the roles. But it's also, empathy is very important when you're engaging with stakeholders in a project setting. And then social skills. No leader is an island. Good social skills allow you to put your emotional intelligence to work. Motivation, we're all clear of the benefits of motivation. And then the last observation is that the brain doesn't distinguish between, for example, being an empathic manager or being a more empathic parent. So these aren't just emotional intelligence skills, and developing them aren't just beneficial for us in the workplace, they're beneficial as life skills. So moving quickly on, the neuroscience bit. The study of neuroscience has come on and moved forward very quickly, particularly around some of the imaging and so on and so forth that's now possible. And theoretical advances in neuroscience have been also aided with the study of neural networks. Brain studies of mental workouts in which you sustain a single chosen focus show the more you detach from what's distracting you and refocus on what you're paying attention to, the stronger the brain circuitry becomes. So what we were talking about to the project managers and talk about in general is about how undertaking mindfulness and these type of exercises is like doing a workout for your brain. And then that's reflected in the knowledge about neuroplasticity. And that's the fact that the brain has an ability to reorganize itself and form new neural connections throughout life. And this is evidenced in neuroplasticity, which, you know, there's lots of evidence from when people have injuries and so on and so forth that this is helpful. And then just with the neuroplasticity and mindfulness. So it's been hypothesized that regular meditation practice can also result in significant changes in the cortical structure in the regions of the brain that are routinely engaged during mental exercise. And there's been studies done on people who practice mindfulness and meditation every day and comparing brain scans of those people with other people who maybe haven't done as much of that type of thing. And there are demonstrable differences in the cortical thickness that would be found in the brain regions of the two different groups of people. And this shows evidence of cortical plasticity. So we were telling that to these project managers involved in the research, sort of to incentivize them to practice the mindfulness that we trained them. So that's where we came on to talking about rewiring your brain and doing the workout for your brain through mindfulness practice. And then we talked about what happens when you practice meditation, which you'll all be familiar with as people who have practiced mindfulness and meditation, and how this strengthens your mind through the practice. And then getting back to the research, so we used two tools. We used psychometric tests that I found have been developed through the London Leadership Academy, which psychometrically test participants against the 5 domains of emotional intelligence. And we did this psychometric test before we delivered the course to the project managers, just after they'd received the psychoeducational training, which was a mindfulness course, and then 3 months after. And these are the actual scores, and you can see, and this was predicted in some other research I looked at as part of my dissertation, where it predicted that if you use psychological education for people, it will have an ongoing beneficial effect, and their emotional intelligence, once they've been exposed to the psychological education, will continue to develop and be enhanced from the experience. And you can see here that in all of the domains across the participants, there was a measurable increase in emotional intelligence as gathered through the psychometric test. And then the second one was also part of the study where they used the brain scans to look at people who regularly practice meditation compared to another group. So I took that test. I'm just trying to remember the precise name of it. We've got these questionnaires and tools, and we're happy to share them if you want. So the MAST is the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale. And again, you can see here that pre-course, there was evidence that people understood how to be mindfully aware. Directly after the course, that had been enhanced, and that mindful awareness and attention and awareness continued to grow 3 months, well, after the course had been completed. And then the next bit was just a bit that we did with the, sorry, I've got lots of slides going on here. Yeah, so this was just a bit about how we did an introduction to mindfulness, and just a bit of a plug really that Valley Steps is the charity that we set up that delivers this across the South Wales Valleys. And if you would like to Google Valley Steps, you'll see their website and a bit more about what they do. And then this was just to demonstrate some of the slides we used when we were engaging with the participants in those courses, getting them to think about how they do things in everyday life, and then we start to teach them the mindful techniques alongside some elements of acceptance and commitment therapy. And I'm not an expert on this because I'm not a psychotherapist or someone that's been trained to deliver this, but really this is the triangle that we get people to start to build their skills around. So the mindfulness bit is about being aware, being in the moment. And we talk a lot about it as if it is for the first time, and reflect back about how children think and feel things compared to how adults think and feel things. And then there's the bit about acceptance, which comes along with being in the moment. And that's about accepting the things that we don't have the power to change at the moment. And then most importantly, and coming back to the emotional intelligence, getting people to understand how to practice being non-judgmental. And that's my details if anyone wants to contact me. So thank you. That's my presentation. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks a lot, James. That was great. I think it's just so helpful to, you've obviously done that as a research project, but it's just so helpful to hear an example of how you bring mindfulness into an organization. So what I heard you saying there was about how you framed it in terms of the neuroscience and the concepts like emotional intelligence to give it some backup and some sort of credibility. And then you also evaluated it. So I think that's been a really, yeah, that's great. Are there any questions for James? Rebecca?
How many people did you do your research with?
It was a small group. I think it was about 25 people. And obviously working in a busy NHS setting, it was, to get people to come along. I think the whole thing, the introductory session to the whole project and to do the testing, and then the mindfulness course is run over 6 hours usually when we were delivering it in the community. So it was like a sort of potted version of that, which took most of the day. And then a third day just to reflect back on everything. So it was quite intensive in terms of time. a proportion of the people that were involved were that year's cohort of NHS graduates, and it was part of their scheme. And then we had a variety of nurse managers who were involved in projects, leaders from corporate services, planners and so on and so forth were involved in lots of projects. Yeah, so it was a fair mix of different people, but all people who were leading in projects. And as well as the psychometric tests and the questionnaires, I also did some qualitative studies with all of them at post the 3 months point to talk about how they felt about going into project meetings and leading teams and so on and so forth post the learning. And they all said that they felt. Right.
From the point of view of regular mindfulness, what do you class as regular mindfulness?
That would be down to people's discretion, I suppose. I mean, what we wanted to do was front load them with that sort of bit of psychological education, and then see what the impact was. But if you were doing an organisation, you might want to have regular sessions, whether that would be focused on this or just in enhancing and maintaining well-being, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Antonia?
Yeah, did you measure, with after the 3 month point, did you measure like how often people continued doing mindfulness or whether they carried on with it?
Yeah, so that was really not measured quantitatively, but through the qualitative questionnaire that I did, it was just a real conversation about that. And I think approximately 50% of people said, yeah, they'd actually taken on doing regular mindful practice just as something as a life skill and something that they wanted to pursue. And the others recognised the benefits of it in terms of being more self-aware, more empathy with other people, but weren't pursuing it as something they did regularly.
So would you say, I don't know, could you see a difference in the results from those who continued with it to those that decide, yep, it had benefits, but they didn't continue with it?
The feedback across the group was really positive. Through that role and just personally, I've kept in contact with some of those people, and some people have really built on that, and other people just found it as an interesting experience that they felt had given them, some added value.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anna.
Yeah, Katja, I've got one. So I'm just curious, because I know that obviously this is a good example of the kind of work, and Ashridge did quite a big piece of research, Ashridge Business School, didn't they, looking at leadership and the changes that people made as a result of mindfulness training, which I think had broadly similar results. And as you know, Katja, I've done some work around a group of executives at UCLH, doing a mindfulness program for them, which was much smaller scale and not so well evaluated. I guess what I'm really interested in is this is it's a big question, but it's one I'd like to throw out to the group. I think mindfulness training is great, and I'm all for it. I think there are lots of obstacles in organisational life, aren't there, that seem to get in the way of compassionate behaviours. So I'm just really curious about whether anyone's got any experience of, maybe some work that also looks at, barriers to being compassionate, or, looks at some of the real difficulties of that, because I just think that's quite a necessary part of interventions, and I don't see many people doing it, really. Does that make sense? I just rambled quite a lot there, sorry.
No, that does make sense, and I think I guess that sort of like leads us into the more general discussion. I mean, there is the research perspective, but I think there is also something like some of us who are not researchers, like, but we know that mindfulness has an effect, and we somehow want to make that available to our organizations, and we encounter barriers. I speak from my own experience. Yeah. Do people have thoughts? I mean, what comes to my mind is quite a lot of research around patient safety and some of the research that looks at organizational culture. That's probably really relevant here as well. But I'd encourage if you have any thoughts, I'd open it up to everyone. Yeah. James, go ahead.
There's a program, I have to confess, I'm not overly familiar with it, but I know it was being used in a health board I worked in Wales, called iCare, and that was focused around compassion, and bringing sort of that understanding of compassion and how to use it in your practice. I know we use that with our teams working in older people's mental health settings.
I haven't heard of that.
I don't have any other details.
Thank you.
Like, yes, some of the rest of you that joined today, have you sort of tried to do a bit of mindfulness with colleagues, or like, what's your experience been? Hannah?
I haven't tried mindfulness, but I have tried doing Tai Chi as a way of breaking up a meeting or a workshop, and it depending on the group, it normally can work really well. And yeah, people seem to appreciate it. Just sort of, 2 or 3 minutes, just stand up and do a bit of mindful Tai Chi, I suppose.
That's fantastic. So is Tai Chi something you practice regularly and that you're able to bring in?
I do a lot of yoga, but I think with Tai Chi, it's easy just to do, there's versions that people can do sitting down or standing up. So it's much more accessible in that, space with different abilities and things. So.
John, I think you've also unmuted yourself. Were you going to come in?
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself about barriers to this and the things and the enablers, and just thinking about different organizations that I've worked in, and just like the cultures in those organizations. So like if you join an organization where culturally it's it's part of what they do to actually to work in a compassionate way, to those kind of things are in place. So for example, they might have like yoga sessions available at lunchtime, or part of the characteristics that they want from people is that you work in a compassionate way. I think it's really easier for this to really work in organizations. And I was just thinking that really I think it could work anywhere, but the organizational culture for me would be something that would really help to help this to kind of be a part of that organization. I guess there may be some people that might not be as receptive to mindfulness practices as others, but actually it's not just, it's that word compassion for me really stood out. And as an organization, if you join an organization and it's a compassionate organization, I feel like you almost become consumed by that, and you have to become that in a way. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? That was a lot of rambling, but I was just thinking about the barriers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I guess there is something like, if an organization has certain qualities, then that's attractive and that would want to work there. But if I just find myself, also organizational culture can change quite a lot. I'm at the moment part of a team that's expanding. So there's a constant question around like, what culture do we want to foster and how do we do that? So how, I guess often where if you you want to bring mindfulness in because there isn't quite enough of it, if you see what I mean. So how do you work with that then? Yeah. And it's really interesting. So I have in the past, I think there is actually a Matthew, is there a webinar about joy in work at the Royal Free and from one of the SIGs in a few weeks or something? Did I see that right? Yeah, I think there's joy in work.
Yeah, sorry, am I on? It's Trustwide Joy in Work Collaborative at the Royal Free in London.
Yeah. So so I used to at one point offer mindfulness sessions for colleagues as part of this Joy in Work initiative. And it was really interesting because some people were really happy to take it up and were really grateful. And noticeably, that was also often the more administrative staff that maybe didn't have so many opportunities than some of the other staff groups. But then it was clearly perceived, although it was part of Joy in Work, it was sometimes perceived as doing nothing and being useless. You know, there was this perception from some people. So there was clearly a tension there. And that was quite difficult because it was already part of the big initiative and it was already being evaluated. So I wasn't quite sure like what more I could sort of do. And I guess in the end of the day, you have to choose your battles. But it's interesting how it can be perceived by non-practitioners and the barriers you might come across. And then I guess there's the other side where I've offered mindfulness in organizations, and it's sort of like been really great. Like, oh yeah, we have ordered fruit for our staff. We've got this mindfulness session. We're good now. We're doing well-being. And so that's the other extreme. So yeah. It's interesting. Any other thoughts or tips around I guess last time there was a lot of conversation about how do we frame mindfulness, what to do if we're not sort of like so confident in offering to lead a session yourself. I really love what you said, Hannah. It's like it doesn't have to be mindfulness, Tai Chi can work as well. Like it's really just sort of what do you feel comfortable with? Any other sort of thoughts? What do you want? Anything you want to share?
I was going to say, I'm definitely going to try this with teams as when the time work.
Sorry, say that again.
I was going to say, I'm definitely going to try using a bit of mindfulness next time there's a good opportunity.
Yeah, and there are recordings that you can use, for example. Yeah. I'd want to keep a couple of minutes just like for and like if anyone wants to make any announcements of events or initiatives you're involved in. I know Anna and I are doing this compassionate care and mindful medicine meditations. Anna, do you want to say a bit about that? What that includes? Oh, I think you're on.
Yeah. So this was an initiative really that was started in the Netherlands by a group of interested people who'd got quite significant mindfulness trainings, so they provide a daily mindfulness or meditation for healthcare and social care workers in the Netherlands. And I'm sure many of you will have heard of Michael West, and he's quite a well-known public figure. He's done. He was originally an occupational psychologist. He's also written a book called The Psychology of Meditation, which is really interesting. And he's recent years done a lot of work around compassionate care. and he just did a big report with the GMC around junior doctors and trying to create conditions in organisations that help to make our junior doctors more healthy. And of course, that's more widely applicable across lots of different professions. And so he was working with the group, and now we are just trying to bring that into the UK. So Katja and I have joined as teachers, and at the moment we're able to offer meditations on Thursdays and Sundays in the UK, and we're hoping to expand our sort of network of teachers and people who'd like to be involved. So if anyone wants to volunteer, you could let Katja or I know. And Katja, can we share the details of the organisation?
I've put a link in the chat so people can have a look. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people want to come along to like a session to just try it out, you can. I've also put my email in the chat, so you can contact me.
Yeah, so just to say they have a very, very low nominal fee if you want to join the organisation, don't they, Katja? But you can actually try that out, and it is I would encourage you. It feels like a really warm and nurturing group, doesn't it? And meditations are really nice, so good to have in these times, I think.
Yeah, and it's explicitly for healthcare workers, and I think they're also trying to create a little bit of community around like a sort of like workshops ever so often, so stuff that you wouldn't get from an app. Yeah, we're running out of time. Is there anything else that anyone wants to announce? Antonia, I saw your post. Where can we find? Where are you sharing the meditation recordings? Is there like a website? Or is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something our marketing team of the charity is going to be promoting. So it will be on the website, but we'll be also sharing things on like social media, like Facebook and Twitter, recordings, and just maybe to raise awareness of Meditation Day and to encourage. Okay, meditation and mindfulness, they're slightly different, but then mindfulness and meditation, they do relate to one another as well. So with it being a World Meditation Day, it could be a good time to raise awareness of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I just want to say we have this group space on the Q community, and you can share any sort of like helpful resources or anything that you come across on there. Yeah. So I think and Kristen, I also noticed you use centering. Do you want to say a bit about that? Okay, you've put it in the chat, so that's fine. Yeah, you don't want to be center stage today, that's fine. Yeah, thanks a lot for coming along today. So I hope you've found this helpful. Thanks a lot, James, for presenting, and thanks for Matthew for organizing us. So I think we will put on another one of these maybe in a couple of months, and just sort of like to practice together, exchange any sort of like experience of how is it going, bringing mindfulness to organizations or Tai Chi. If you've got any ideas for like anyone you would want to hear from, or any projects you've been involved in, do a little presentation like James did today, do get in touch. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming along. And we're also going to stay on the line for a little bit longer if you've got any more questions or anything. But don't feel obliged to stay. Thanks a lot for joining us.